Hello everyone, so today in this video we will be learning all about major accounts. So the major accounts in accounting are assets, liabilities, owner's equity, revenues, and expenses. So kani siya nga plastada sa inyong major accounts is mo ni siya ang plastada kung mag-trial balance na mo. But so much for that. Ato ang tunan ang different types or different major accounts in accounting. So first, we will talk about assets. So assets, in assets, we have two types of assets or two classifications of assets. We have the current assets and the non-current assets. So in current assets, we have cash, accounts receivable, notes receivable, inventories, unused supplies or supplies, ang usahay nga account nga masulat sa iyaha sa trial balance, and then prepaid rent and allowance for doubtful account. In the non-current assets naatay tulo ka buok. So the property, plant and equipment, plant na siya dili dahil siya plant na siya T, and then accumulated depreciation and intangible assets. In the property, plant and equipment, we have different property, plant and equipment. So ang maapil sa atong discussion karon are equipments, furnitures and fixtures, building and land. So first, we will tackle about current assets. So the first current assets is the cash. Cash, this includes cash on hands, cash deposits in bank, and cash fund or ginatawag nato na petty cash fund. And then in cash is included pod ang mga short-term, highly liquid investments that are acquired 3 months before maturity or earlier. So ang cash mo na siya ang pinaka kanang mas gamit sa kada transaction sa isa ka company. Next is the accounts receivable. In the accounts receivable, mo na siya ang represents the money owed by the customers to the business. So when the problem says the company billed the customer for the service rendered, so billed, the word billed, ang timailahan or ang buot pasabot ana is ang customer wala siya nagbayad sa imuha sa serbisyo nga imuhang gibayad. So ang gamiton nimo nga account ana is the or ang account nga mo represent ana niya is the accounts receivable. From the word receivable, so dawatonon pa nimo siya nga kwarta. Number 3 is the notes receivable. In the notes receivable, it represents the amount of money owed by the customer or debtor to the business evidenced by a promissory note. So, ang notes receivable from the word notes, so naa siya written promissory note. So, ang promissory note is didto nakabutang kung kanusa siya magbayad, pila nga amount ang iyahang bayaran. So, mo na siya nga notes receivable. Pareha siya sa accounts receivable nga giutang sa customer ang imuhang serbisyo, but instead gitagaan kaniya og promissory note ti mailhan nga naa siya'y utang sa imuha. Number 4 is inventories. Represents assets held for sale in ordinary course of business, in the process of production for sale or in the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or in the rendering of services. So inventories, there are many types of inventories. Natay inventories kung example is service business ka, ang imong inventory is katong imuhang mga ginagamit para makahatag ka og serbisyo sa imong mga customers. If you are in the manufacturing businesses, is kato imuhang mga raw materials, mga outputs nimo nga gamiton nimo, mga inputs nimo nga gamiton nimo para ma-produce ang imong output, which is your products, so imong mga raw materials. And then another type of inventory is ang imuhang kaning mga pag merchandising business ka is ang imuhang mga baligya, imong mga display mo na siya imuhang gina-inventory. inventories. Number 5 is the unused supplies or usahay nakabutang ni siya sa chart of account nga supplies lang. So it represents supplies which remains unused at the end of the accounting period. So supplies mo ni siyang sabutable naman guro nino kung naa kay opisina, imuhang mga papel, mga ballpen, mo na siya yung mga supplies, mga office supplies nimo. Or kung kitchen ka or restaurant ka, imo mga supplies is katong mga ginagamit sa kitchen. Number 6 is prepaid rent. Refers to an advance payment made by the business to cover for future rental payments. So from the word pre. So from the word pre is nag-advance ka og pay. So for example, your business had rented a building para makapadayon mo sa inyong business or makabuhat mo sa inyong business is nag-prepaid rent mo. So from January up to December is gibayaran ninyo ang katibukan sa tuig. So that is called the prepaid rent. Or pwede pod from January to February, then January mo nag-start og business, then up to February ang inyong gibayaran nga rent. It is also classified as prepaid rent from the word advance. Next, or the last current asset accounts is a current asset account is the allowance for doubtful accounts. So allowance for doubtful account is a contra asset or evaluation account which refers to the portion of accounts receivable that is estimated to be uncollectible at the end of the particular accounting period. So kani siya nga account is nag-base ni siya sa accounts receivable. Okay? There are times nga naatay mga customer nga murag ga-doubt bitaw ta kung mubayad ba or dili, or naay mga percent gyud sa imuhang accounts receivable nga doubtful ka nga imuha bang makolect within the accounting period. So muna siya nga naatay ginatawag nga allowance for doubtful accounts. In the allowance for doubtful accounts, pwede ang company or the owner should say 20% sa iyahang accounts receivable doubtful siya nga makolect at the end of the accounting period, or pwede pod exactly the amount gyud. Example naman siya nga 20,000 pesos ang doubtful siya nga dili niya makolect in the at the end of the accounting period. So muna siyang mga amounts nga ginabutang sa allowance for doubtful accounts. So in the previous video nag-discuss ta kang statement of financial position. Kaning allowance for doubtful account, makita ni siya sa kang accounts receivable, then i-less dayon siya sa accounts receivable kay lagi dili makasure kung makolek ba to nimo or dili at the end of the accounting period. So those are the current assets. So naatay cash, accounts receivable, notes receivable, inventories, unused supplies, prepaid rent, and allowance for doubtful accounts. Now we proceed to non-current assets. So in the non-current assets, natay property, plant, and equipment. So these are the property, plant, and equipment classified. Classification. So first is equipment. This represents manual or automated machines used in the business, and they include photocopying equipment, computers, laptop, ring binders, laminating machines, and among others. So it means if the problem says the company had purchased a computer in the amount of 100,000. So when you record that transaction, ang imong gamiton nga account title is the equipment. So mo na siya. Letter B, nga type of property, plant, and equipment is the furnitures and fixtures. This refers to assets such as tables, chairs, filing cabinets, and display racks. So kung nakay opisina, ang imong company, ang isa ka company na magina siya ay opisina, mo gay natay admin og natay operating. So ang gagamit ana is ang mga gamit ana is ginatawag nato nga furnitures and fixtures. So if your company had If sa isa ka transaction nag-ingon siya nga the company had bought tables in the amount of 2,000 pesos, so ang imong ibutang is furnitures and fixtures nga account title, dili ka mo ingon nga tables kay naman siya classification sa property, plant and equipment. Letter C is the building. This refers to the physical structure owned and used by the business to conduct its operation. So di ba kaganina sa current assets, nagisgot ta og prepaid rent. If your company had rented a building to conduct its operation, it is not classified as a property, plant, and equipment or as an asset on your company. Kung moingon ta nga building, it's a physical structure owned by the company, so ang company gyud ang nagpabuhat ana nga building o siya gyud ang tag-iya, dili lang kay nagrenta siya. So dapat inyuha gyud ang building nga inyuhang gamit to conduct its operation nga inyong i-record sa inyuhang journal entry or book of accounts. Letter D is land. This refers to the physical site na siya dili sire. Site owned by the business where the building is situated. It is not subject to depreciation. So among the property, plant, and equipment, ang dili lang gid mo depreciate is the land. Kay the land is dili mo mubo ang iyahang face value or market value. Mutaas na siya sa magkadugay. And then the same is true with the building. If the land is on rent, dili nimo siya i-classify as your property, plant, and equipment. The land should be owned by the company. So, those are your property, plant, and equipment. Number 2 on the non-current assets is the accumulated depreciation, which is the same as the allowance for doubtful account. It is a contra asset which refers to the aggregate portion to the total cost of property, plant, and equipment that has been charged to depreciation expense. So in accumulated depreciation, it is a contra asset, meaning mo gyapon siya ang mo minus sa property, plant, and equipment. So ang accumulated depreciation magamit nimo kung magdeduct na ka sa lifespan o sa amount nga gakagamit sa isa ka property, plant, and equipment. So, ma-discuss na nato furtherly pag mag-discuss na to sa mga depreciation sa mga property, plant, and equipment. Number 3 is intangible assets. It is a non-monetary asset without physical substance held for use in the production or supply of goods or services for rental to others or for administrative purposes. So these are goodwill, patents, copyrights, licenses, franchise, trademarks, brand names, and among others. So muna sila ang mga kanang ginahold sa company as asset pero dili siya magunitan. Mga rights lang siya nga naa sa asset, parehaan ng pag ang company is makaproduce sila og their own product. So ang ilahan ng kuan brand names, ilahan po ng example para sa uban ng company kanang magproduce sila og food, then magpa-franchise sila, mo nilang ginatawag nga intangible assets. So number 2 or part 2, ikaduha nga kanang major accounts nga ginagamit sa accounting is the liabilities. So in liabilities, the same as true with assets, we have the current liabilities and the non-current liabilities. So these are the current liabilities: accounts payable, notes payable, accrued liabilities, unearned revenues, current portion of long-term debt. Then ang non-current liabilities nato is the mortgage payable and the bonds payable. So ang some of my students maglibog sila og classify from assets to liabilities. So in liabilities, pag makita kay mo word nga payable, mo na siya ginatawag nga liabilities. So kay ang uban mo na kong mga student, even though na siya word nga payable, gina-classify nila as asset. So pag na word nga payable, it is a liability. So liable ka, so payable nimo. First na to nga discuss on the liabilities or the current liabilities. So first account is accounts payable, represents the amount of money owed by the business to creditors or suppliers. So accounts payable, ganina in the assets, we've discussed accounts receivable. So accounts receivable is the customer is sila ang naibayro nun sa imuha or sila ang naibayro nun sa company. In the accounts payable, is bali na pod, ikaw ang naay utang dito sa imuhang creditors or sa imong suppliers. Because there are some instances, especially when you are a merchandising business, is when you purchase a supply, is ginautang nimo. So, ay hara din nimo bayaran with the dates nga imuhang giingon nga kanus-an nimo siya bayaran. Number 2 on the current liabilities is the notes payable. So it represents the amount of money owed by the business to suppliers or creditors evidenced by a promissory note. So in current asset, we've discussed notes receivable. It means that the customer had given you a promissory note stated of when he wanted to pay the amount, when he wanted to pay the unpaid amount and then the specified amount kung pila iyahang dapat bayaran. In the notes payable is bali na pod siya. You, the company or the owner itself, has a utang to the suppliers and then evidence with a promissory note. So mag-promise po dayon ang company to the suppliers if ganusa siya magbayad og pilang amount ang ilang ibayad. Number 3 on the current liabilities are accrued liabilities. So accrued liabilities, some of these are very useful when you adjust transactions or when you adjust accounts or the amounts. So amounts owed to other for unpaid expenses. These accounts include salaries payable, utilities payable, interest payable, and taxes payable. So salaries payable, involved ni siya usahay sa kanang kuan sa mga adjustments. Utilities payable, there are some instances na a problem would say receive a bill from telecommunication company for the month of January. So when we say receive a bill, so papel lang sa imuhang na receive, murag statement lang siya nga nagaingon nga nakay bayro nun nga ingon ani nga amount dito sa telecommunication company. So ang imuhang gamit nga account title ana pag record nimo is the utilities payable. So in salaries pod, example, if your payment is on every week kagabayad on Saturday and then ang December 31 nimo is na fall on Friday, so ang katong Saturday nimo is i-adjust nimo to siya dahil ang amount ni adto is ibutang nimo sa salaries payable. So katong mga nato ato ratong ma-discuss furtherly sa atong topic nga adjustments. Number 4 is unearned revenues. So represents the cash collected by the business in advance for service or good that is not yet to be rendered or delivered. Kung natay ginatawag nga accounts receivable, it is because from the transaction na you rendered a service but the customer did not pay for it, nagkuan lang siya, iyang giutang imong serbisyo, kaning unearned revenues is kanang generous ang imuhang customer. So nagbayad siya daan og amount in advance for the service you have to render in an exact date and in with the amount. So for example, the company has the transaction is a customer had paid an advance of 200,000 for the company to render a services to them. So kana siya unearned revenues na siya. It is a advance collection of payment from the customer. Number 5 is the current portion of long-term debt. Kung naatay ang long-term debt na po the current portion. The current portion is, these are portions of mortgage notes, bonds, and other long-term indebtedness which are to be paid within 1 year from the balance sheet date. So, when you have a utang, and then 3 years nimo siya bayaran, and then, example, nag-utang ka on, example, ang imong company is nagsugod siya January 2020 and then mag-end siya on December 2020. So, it is a calendar year-end company. And then, at the middle, July, nag-utang ka o kwarta sa bangko. And then, 3 years siya bayran. So, gikan sa July up to December, muna siya imong current portion sa imong utang. Ang katong sunod nga mga bulan o sunod nga mga tuig, mo to siya ginatawag nga long term. So, the current portion is classified on the current liabilities and the long term is katong gawas pa sa imuhang year-end for the year 2020 is ginatawag nga long term. So, next is the current liabilities. So, we have two types of non-current liabilities. So, we have two non-current liabilities, the mortgage payable and the bonds payable. So, mortgage payable represents the amount of money borrowed by the business from a bank or a lending institution with a which is secured by a collateral. So, pareha nang mag-utang ka sa isa ka bangko, then imong gi-collateral ang ownership sa imuhang TV, ownership sa imuhang ref, land title sa imuhang land. So, muna siyang ginatawag nga mortgage payable. Number 2 is the bonds payable. Substantial sum of money from lenders to finance the acquisition of equipment and other needed assets. The bond is a contract between the issuer and the lender specifying the terms of repayment and interest to be charged. So, ang bonds payable is muna siyang ginatawag na to nga kanang ang bangko mo finance sa gusto nimo paliton nga sakyanan or sa gusto nimo paliton nga mga assets mo ni mga property, plant and equipment nimo nga mga assets. So for example, you wanted to buy a car pero wala kay kanang igong amount nga i-cash. So niadto ka sa imuhang bangko, nangutang ka didto, ang imong giutang is a bonds payable which is ang bangko may magbayad o cash ngadto sa company nga gikwaan sa car, let us say Toyota, dayon di na ka magbayad sa Toyota, ama ka magbayad sa bangko kay sila man ang nag full payment sa imuhang car. So muna siya ang bonds payable. So human ta sa liabilities, let us go to number 3 major account which is the owner's equity. So, in the owner's equity, natay duha ka buok. The capital and the drawing. So, capital is the amount the owner invested in the company through cash or other assets plus earnings of the company not withdrawn by the owner. So, capital is pwede siya an investment nga pang cash, pwede po siya assets. Let us say the owner had invested a photocopier to the company in the use of service. So, naghatag siya og photocopying machine para gamiton sa company para maka-provide og sa ilhang services. So, muna siya ang capital. Plus the earnings is your net income or your profit, maad man na siya diretso sa capital. Number 2 is the drawing. Amount that the owner or drawing or usahay kay ginabutang ni siya as ang word nga ginabutang ani is the withdrawal. So the amount that the owner of the sole proprietorship had withdrawn for personal use during the accounting year. At the end of the year, the amount of this account will be transferred into capital. So drawing at the end of the year, ginadidak na siya sa statement of owner's equity to the capital. So, para mabalaan nimo kung pila gid ang nabilin sa imuhang capital. So, muna siya ang duha ka type of accounts found in the owner's equity. So, let us proceed to revenues. So, ang revenues, there are many types of revenues. It is always according to what type of services is being provided by the company. So, first revenue is service revenue. This refers to the earnings made by any business that is into rendering service. So, example, laundry business. So, pwede ang iyang gamiton nga kanang account title when he will record the services he had rendered on the laundry shop is service revenue. Number 2, interest income represents interest credited by the bank to the account of the business arising from bank deposits. So, interest income is paraan nang magpautang ang bangko. Ang bangko, ang pinaka main nga income gid ana niya is from the interest sa mga nangutang. Even kanang mga co-op sa interest na sila ga salig. So, malipay gina sila kung naay mangutang kay mutaas ang ilahang interest income. Next type of revenue is the sales. Represents the earnings made by any business that is into selling goods or merchandise. So, when your business is a merchandise business, selling many types of goods, so ang imong igamiton nga account title is sales. Dili ka mo gamit og service revenue because you are not giving services to your customers. You are giving giving goods to your kanang customer. So, you use the account title sales. Number 4, professional fee represents earnings made by professionals or experts from rendering services to the clients. So, when you are a certified public accountant nga naa kay kanang auditing firm, ang gamiton nimo nga kanang account title in rendering services is professional fee kay imuha mang profession ang pagka-accountant dayon imuhang render sa imuhang client, so muna siyang ginatawag nga professional fee, as well as the engineers, the architects, and many other professions nga ga-render og service to their clients. So remember, ang revenues is daghan siya types, magdepende siya sa type of business nga naa ang company. So, ang type of business nato is the service business, the merchandising, manufacturing, muna sila ang tulo. So, lastly, are expenses. So, napoy ubad nga galibog aning expenses, no? The same as liabilities. So, kung sa liabilities, ang imuhang timailhan nga nung maklasify nimo siya as liabilities is the word payable. Ang expenses is the word expense. So, namugoy uban natong mga estudyante nga maglipog yapon ani mga expenses. So, number 1. So, kung naatay utilities payable, napunta utilities expense refers to the cost associated with the use of electricity, water, communication for a particular accounting period. So, when the problem says paid the electric bill for the month of July. So, ang imuhang gamiton ana is utilities expense. Dili ka magamit og electricity expense, water expense, then communication expense. Kay pareha ra man sila classified as utilities expense. So, muna siya imuhang gamiton para dili daghan og accounts. Kay if a company has too many accounts, questionable na siya usahay kay gadaghana ba nig account dako day kay ning company. So muna siyang emerge na tong uban nga mga kanang ginagmay lang bitong mga electric, water, communication, butang nato sa utilities expense. Number 2 is salaries expense. Kung natay salaries payable, naapod tay salaries expense refers to the cost incurred associated with the services rendered by the permanent and full-time employees who are paid in regular basis, usually monthly. So mag-record kani kung nibutang paid salaries for the month, I paid salaries in the amount of 50,000 for the month of July. So gamito nimo ang salaries expense. Number 3 is wages expense. So the difference between the wages and the salaries expense is ang wages, the service rendered normally by contractual and temporary employees. So when you are a regular employee, ang naka-record ana or kung naa kay regular employee nga ginabayaran nimo monthly, ang gamiton nimo nga account title is the salaries expense. Kung magbayad po ka sa imuhang mga contractual or temporary employees or kanang kada semana nimo bayaran or kada adlaw lang nimo bayaran or kung naa lang kay ipatrabaho then bayaran nimo sa sweldo, wages expense ang imuhang gamiton para mabalaan kung kanang pila gid ay kadako ang gakabayaran nimo sa salaries expense which is your regular employees ug pila pud kadako nga amount ang gakabayaran nimo sa imong mga contractual or temporary employees. Number 4, taxes and licenses. So when we have taxes payable, murag tie up ra siya sa payable ug sa expense, no? When we have taxes payable, we have taxes and licenses expense, cost incurred to register the business, to acquire the rights to operate and to settle taxes. So kung nakabayad ka og taxes sa BIR for the month or for the quarter, imong i-record sa taxes and licenses. Kung for example, diba, every January, even though fiscal ka or fiscal ka or calendar year end ang imuhang company, every January mag-renew magid ka sa imuhang license to operate. So kana katong nga mga expenses nga gigamit para maka-operate ka is diretso siya ma-record sa imuhang taxes and licenses. Number 5, cost of sales refers to the cost of merchandise or goods that were sold during the particular accounting period. So, ginagamit niya siya sa mga merchandising businesses ang cost of sales. Number 6, supplies expenses. This refers to the supplies that was used during a particular accounting period. So, sa atong current assets natay ginatawa or natay account title nga unused supplies or supplies. So na din siya tie up sa expenses nga supplies expense, which is diri nimo gina-record katong mga nagamit na nimo nga supplies at the end of the accounting period or at the end of the accounting period. Next expenses are doubtful account expense. So in the current assets is naatay contra asset nga allowance for doubtful accounts. Ang iyahang partner ana kung mag-record na dayon ka is the doubtful account expense. So amount of account receivable that is estimated as uncollectible and is recognized as an expense in the current accounting period. Nga ng expense man siya kay dili ka sure kung makolekta balagi nimo siya or dili. Number 8 is depreciation expense. So kung ang allowance for doubtful account, ang iyahang partner pag mag-entry ka is the doubtful account expense, ang sa accumulated depreciation, ang iyahang pong partner ana pag mag-entry na ka is the depreciation expense. So the depreciation expense refers to the allocated portion of cost of property, plant, and equipment charged to expense in the current accounting period. So mao ni ang mga amount nga ma-charge aning depreciation expense is katong mga nagamit ng katong mga amount nga na ni-depreciate na ang imuhang equipment or the property, plant, and equipment. For example, the company bought a service vehicle in the amount of 500,000 with an estimated useful life of 5 years and a salvage value of 150 pesos. So isolve nimo iyang depreciation value. Ang katong makuha nimo sa iyang depreciation value or depreciable value is imuha siyang i-charge sa accumulated depreciation, partner din nimo sa imuhang depreciation expense. So mas atoan na siyang masabtan pag mag-discuss na po ta about ani gyud nga mainly depreciation lang gyud. Number 9 is the insurance expense. So kung naay prepaid insurance, kung naatay prepaid rent, naapo daytay prepaid insurance. So, kung naatay prepaid rent, naatay rent expense. Kung naatay prepaid insurance, naapod tay insurance expense. So, portion of the premiums on insurance coverage which has expired. So, muna siyang portion sa nga expire nga insurance. So, those are the major accounts in accounting. So, these are the assets, liabilities, owner's equities, revenues, and expenses, which are all very useful or which are ginagamit yun when we are journalizing transactions, the general ledger, makita na nimo sila tanan hantod sa statements or sa financial statements. So, thank you very much for watching, and before we end this video, shout out lang nato si Feby Dayondon, Ruel Marcito, and then Gracelyn Inglis.